This is my good friend, Boogie. He pastors a church in San Clemente for the Dana Point, South Orange County area. And we've been buddies for, 15, 16 years now, a long time. And we rarely get to see each other's churches because we're both pastors of our own churches. For years, we've been talking about, dude, we should set up a 2-Sunday event where we write a sermon together, and I'll speak it at your church with you, and then the next week you'll speak it at my church with me. And so my father crisscrossed us. He spoke last week. How many people were blessed by my dad's sermon last week? I got more, encouragement for my dad's sermon last week than anything else. Some of you have said, Buzz, could you retire? Can he come back? You want to do a swip swap. And so he's not for it. So he's blessing Boogie's church with that.
He actually just texted. You didn't see the text.
I didn't see it.
Buzz said, hey, Dad, how'd it go? Or Pops, how'd it go? And he texted back, it must have gone great. They gave me a bunch of awards. You didn't see that? He said,
no.
I think it was an autocorrect.
Oh, okay.
But maybe not.
Maybe they gave him some trophies.
We've never done it, but knowing it's him,
yes,
it might have gone down.
Whether or not you've ever met Boogie, this church has encountered Boogie. I have told many stories about him, and we go over our sermons together quite often. And so you have heard insight and scriptural wisdom from him through me, because as I've processed sermons, he said, what about this? Or have you thought about saying it like this? Oh, Boog, that's better than what I had. And so you guys have heard his heart. And a few months ago, I shared a story about when I was in Palm Desert with some pastor friends, and we saw a street fight happening, and we kind of drove up to it to try and break it up. Well, this is the guy that was there with me, Boogie and I, with our buddy John, and the story has morphed a little bit. It's kind of started as we saw a street fight and we broke it up, but now when we tell the story, it was a gang fight. We don't know that they were in a gang, but I'm pretty sure that it was the Bloods, the Crips, the Latin Kings, the Taliban, the Republicans, and the Democrats. They were all there, and we stepped up and broke it up. But we were in a car, we got out of a restaurant, and Boogie spotted it first, and he went, I think we should go address that. And we drove up and got out of the van to break up the fight. And I've shared that story with you guys, but as we were preaching a sermon together on godly friendships, and that story came up, you had a different perspective of that event than I had thought of. What was your take of us ending gang violence in the world?
Well, I realized as you're sharing this story, and I looked over and saw my wife, she doesn't know about this story, because I try to keep some of those. I don't want her to go, oh, did you just do that again? Oh, because sometimes the right thing to do is not the smart thing to do. And this was one of those situations where it was bad. It was very serious. In fact, afterwards, we really had to process through it, the three of us, because it was disturbing what these guys were doing to each other and their anger, and there were some people that, one guy in particular was very seriously injured while we were there. So we saw it, and our perspective is different, and I realized how different it was last Sunday at Branches when we were sharing about it, because he was bringing up things that I didn't see, and I was bringing up things that he didn't see or feel. And I remember jumping out of the car, and I remember getting into the situation, and like I said, it wasn't smart. It was the right thing to do, but as I'm in the midst of it, I went, oh, this is bad. And I realized, the stage adds about 6 inches to your height and about 50 pounds of weight, but I realized this is bad, and I'm in this. And I looked over and realized Buzzy was there. John was nowhere to be found, but Buzzy was right there. And everything happened so fast, but it was obvious. I wasn't like, oh, Buzzy's here. It wasn't a surprise, because that's the kind of friendship we have. And I knew that he would be there even if he didn't want to be, because I was there. Because I was stepping into this situation that he would literally, in this situation, lay down his life for me. And so we jumped into this situation, and it was a reminder to me of what real friendship looks like. Because what these guys were doing was not friendship. Some of them were probably high, some were probably drunk, some of them were mob mentality, but they weren't looking out for each other. In fact, I think we were looking out for them more than they were looking out for each other. And that's the difference between a Christ-centered friendship versus just bros or friends.
Yeah. And so this story was circulating in our conversation as we said, as we discuss if we're going to team preach at your church and then my church, what's the message? What do we feel like God is compelling us to say to our collective congregations, our churches that God has entrusted us with? And we both felt like just this awareness, drawing the awareness in the scriptures to our people, to our congregations, to our godly communities that we're a part of, about the importance of Christ-centered friendships, godly friendships, and the reality that God calls us to Him. God invites us to a relationship with Him so that He can do a work in us that makes us equipped to be part of a community. So in one way to say it is that God is calling you to these people. He calls us to each other. And when you look through the totality of scriptures, you see over and over in Genesis chapter 2, the creation poem, Genesis chapter 2, God, creates the garden, He creates the world, and then He creates Adam and gives Adam this boundary, don't eat from this tree. And then after that, God looks at Adam and He goes, it's not good for man to be alone. So all the way back in Genesis chapter 2, we see God going, man shouldn't be alone. What I have created was created for partnership. And as you look through the scriptures, you see these pairings over and over again. And I was thinking about God will use people, individuals, to do things, but the two that came to mind were Jonah and Elijah. And Elijah was depressed and hiding out in a cave, and Jonah was whining and complaining, I don't want to do it. And so it's the times that you see God sending people in pairs, like Exodus 3. God goes to Moses, burning bush moment, and says, hey, go to Egypt and free the slaves. And Moses kind of pushes back. I don't want to. I'm not good at speaking. What if they don't believe you sent me? What do I tell them? And then God keeps saying, no, I want you to do it. I want you to do it. And Moses keeps throwing these objections. And finally, in Exodus chapter 4, God goes, what about your brother-in-law, Aaron? He's already on his way to meet you. And after that, there's no more objections from Moses. It's God went, I know you need a partner in this. You need that bond. And we see all the way John chapter 15, Jesus said, this is my command, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no man than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends. And so from the beginning, woven through it all, even into what Jesus says, the Apostle Paul says, we see that God works through these bonds of friendship, familyship, and God is concerned with the kind of people that we make ourselves available to and that we invite in. There's one passage that stood out to me, Proverbs chapter 22, make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare. So God is directing the people, saying, hey, you got to be careful with who you put yourself around, because it's going to influence you. And so when we're talking about these friendships, what was it that made you feel like this is worth saying? This is something that we need to share with our congregations.
Well, I think our church is young, meaning the people there are a little bit younger, but it really doesn't matter your age. But I see it with a lot of the young people when they're coming to Christ or coming to church. It's what does this have to offer me? What can I get out of this? Mm-hmm. And yet when we enter into this seeking of a relationship with God, as He draws us to Himself, He's drawing us to each other. And I mean to each other as in the church, the people within the church. And so, I look out and I see your chairs, which are really comfortable, by the way, way better than ours. And I look and I wonder how many of you actually have this kind of friendship with each other. Because we will have people at our church, like at every other church, they come, they want the coffee, they want the donuts, they want the amenities for their kids. They want to have something for themselves. But yet when God calls us, He's calling us to each other. And we so often leave that out. But when you leave out that element, you're not really entering into the fullness of the kingdom of God. You're not entering into what he has planned for us. But it is so uncomfortable. It is so much easier. Just, it feels like you're playing it safe. It's nicer to not have to interact with people. I mean, you have your little interaction time. You're like, okay, that's enough for me. That was good. But don't, like at our church sometimes we'll say, okay, we're gonna break into groups of 3, 4, 5. Yeah, you have the face of some of the people in our church. Like, okay, you're not gonna do that right now, right? Like, I don't wanna, they're there, and I know they're here, and there's some up there, but I don't really wanna do that. But then once we break into those groups, we give them a question, kind of start off the message and the teaching, then it's hard to get them back out of it. But the hardest part is to get into that kind of friendship. Yet that is what the people of God are supposed to be, to have these kind of friendships that we're talking about.
Yeah. There's a passage in 1 Samuel chapter 20, and we're going to look at a couple of verses from this because it highlights this remarkable connection between two individuals. David, before he became the king, David and Goliath, David, and the current king, King Saul's son, Jonathan. David and Jonathan had this friendship. So if you want, open your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 20. In fact, first, hold your Bible up if you have your Bible. Love to see who brought their Bible. Good, 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 good. If you don't have a Bible and you want a Bible, we'd love to give you a Bible. Our ushers are standing in the aisles, and if you just want one, slip your hand up real quick. Our ushers will give you a Bible. That's our gift to you, so you can just put your hand up. And while you're doing that, just turn to 1 Samuel chapter 20. And just to set the scene for this, in 1 Samuel chapter 19, David's life, an attempt on David's life had been made 4 times. The king tried to kill David 4 times. Once chucked a spear at him. And so David's kind of like feeling on shaky ground, like, what is going on that someone's trying to kill me? This is crazy. And so that's where we pick up in the story. And so the king's tried to kill David, and look what David does. 1 Samuel chapter 20. Then David fled from Naioth at Ramah and went to Jonathan and asked. So he goes to his friend. Like, where does he flee? He goes to his friend, to this bond, and he asks, what have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he is trying to kill me? And I love what David does there, because he goes to his friend and says, tell me what I'm missing, because I don't understand what I've done that has put my life in this situation, but if you see something that I don't see, speak it to me. And that's a pretty intense thing to do to somebody, to invite somebody. First of all, to have a friendship with somebody that knows you well enough to be able to speak into your life like that. But then the beauty of going to somebody saying, tell me what you see. And it's one of the things that makes me adore my friendship with this guy, because we know each other well enough. He knows me well enough, and he's not afraid to speak a truth to me, even if it's something that might sting a little bit. And a pivotal moment in my life in the last 8 months was we were having a conversation. I was sharing a frustration with him, going, this scenario is just frustrating to me because the people around are doing this. And Boogie stops me and he goes, Buzz, can I share something that I see in you? Yeah. And he said, I recognize a pattern. I've seen it here when you told me about the story that happened with these people. I've seen it here, and I see it now in what you're describing. And sometimes I don't think you see things the way they really are, but you kind of create almost this negative reality, and you think that's it. But I don't think that you're seeing things correctly. You've got a weird lens that you're seeing things through. And it was, as Boogie describes it, one of those like, ouch, that helps moments, right? And I love that here's this individual who knows me well enough to recognize those patterns that I didn't even see in myself, and knows that he has the right and the privilege and the place, the voice to speak that into me. And so if we're looking at this passage for like, what are the elements of a godly friendship? This is one of them. To be known and invite the voice. Like you were telling the story about your buddy Nordy, is that his name? Yeah, tell them that story.
Well, if I'm going to tell that story, then you need to tell the story about the gym, because I think that's really helpful, the lady that was coaching you.
Oh, yeah. So,
I think you should share that first.
So obviously, I'm at the gym all the time, right? And so there's a number of
You just threw a little chest out there. Totally. You were bending over like this. You go, obviously, and then after you said that, then you wanted to.
So one of the gyms that I train at, there's this lady who's been there a bunch of times that I've been training, and all the gyms, I train at multiple gyms, and there's men and women all over the place, and women try to get my number all the time, and like this one lady has come up to me multiple times to tell me that I'm doing something incorrectly. Let me show you how to do that better. Like technique. The other day I was stretching, and she came up and she said, you're stretching incorrectly. Let me show you. And here's the thing. Everything she said was true. Like, she had correct insight. Like, she did understand these movements better than me, but there was a part of me that was like, lady, I don't know you. Like, why are you throwing salt on my gym game right now? Like, this is not cool. It's not easy to bench press 500 pounds. Leave me alone. But so it's like she said the truth, but I didn't know her. And so it's weird, like when somebody that doesn't know you wants to come up and be like, let me show you how to do that correctly. It's like, who are you? Like, I couldn't receive it the way that I could receive it from like my training partner in the gym or one of my coaches, the way that like somebody else could have said exactly what you said to me about my personality flaws, that I would have been like, even if it was right, I don't know if I could have received it from them, because the foundation of the friendship wasn't there. And so that it is here gave me the ability to receive it.
Yeah, you didn't. She wasn't given permission by you.
Mm-mm.
She just charged into the situation.
Correct.
And so my friend Nordy, he was a junior high teacher at one time. And so imagine 6th and 7th graders, imagine the kind of things they think about, farts, things like that. And so he's in front of the class and he's teaching. He's a literature teacher. He's a professor at college now. So he's Dr. Norton then, but he was just Mr. Norton at this time. And he's teaching through literature, and you could see this. He sees this one kid that's not feeling comfortable with something, and so he kind of raises his hand, and he doesn't fully raise it. He's like, should I do this? Should I not? It's that hesitation. And yeah, Kenny, what is it? And Mr. Norton, you have a booger hanging out of your nose. And the class responds in the same way. They're giggling, laughing, but there's also the, what is Mr. Norton going to do to Kenny? What kind of punishment is he going to give? Because he just embarrassed him. And so Mr. Norton, my buddy, Norty, he said, you know what, Kenny? That is extra credit right there. 100 points, extra credit. And the other kid's like, what? Because he said, look, you guys all saw this problem, and none of you stepped up. He's basically given the entire class permission to speak in to protect him so he doesn't make a fool of himself. And so the rest of the school year, you can imagine the stuff they're picking up. Hey, is your zipper down? And they're looking for anything possible because they've been given permission. And that always sticks out to me, and especially in my friendship with Norty. Norty was the best man at my wedding. And and the friendships we're talking about here, I want to make sure we clarify those, the kind of friendship that David and Jonathan have. I think C.S. Lewis, as he does with just about everything, describes it so clearly. And so the kind of friendship that we're not talking about, he talks about eros, and he talks about intimacy, those type of friendships. And the metaphor that he gave was how you face each other. And so, for example, he says when there's that romance friendship, when there's that kind of intimacy, between like spouses, they're going to be like this. Like even now you're kind of turned to the side, but it's that kind of, yeah. So you guys are just as uncomfortable as we are. So when we have these conversations, it's not like that, because the friendship that C.S. Lewis discusses and the friendship that we're talking about today between women and men is one which they're side by side. And in terms of like the fight that we ended up trying to get into, we literally had to go
Yeah,
back
to back. You got to watch
at
all
one point
angles.
to like care for each other.
Yeah.
And so this friendship that I have with Nordy is such where we speak into each other's life. He knows how much money I make. Talk about being vulnerable. Like these kind of friendships, it's not like, yeah, just go get it. It's like you don't want to, like you're just laying it out there. Like this is how much comes in, and even scary, and this is how much is going out. And we spend enough time with each other and with our wives. He knows how I speak to my wife. He knows how I interact with my kids. He knows where I spend my time. He knows what I'm thinking and feeling because I expose all of that to him. And when you give that kind of permission to someone, I have an expectation of him just like he has an expectation of me. And it's that expectation, and I've told him this, and he's told me this. I said, Nordy, we need to clarify this. We need to lay it all out on the table because we're doing this. But this David-Jonathan type of friendship that we're talking about here is such that if my marriage falls apart and you saw things that were in there, or if my kids grow up and don't want to interact with me or talk with me, or if I make horrible financial decisions, or more importantly than anything else, if you see me drifting from the Lord and you don't speak to me and share that with me, then you are held responsible also. And that's the kind of friendship we're talking about, that side-to-side, back-to-back type of friendship.
Yeah, so David goes to Jonathan in this passage, says, tell me what you see. And in the next verse, Jonathan's response is pretty gorgeous. He says, never. In response to, why is your father trying to kill me? He goes, never. Jonathan replied, you're not going to die. Look, my father doesn't do anything great or small without letting me know. Why would he hide this from me? It isn't so. And so I love that Jonathan, he does a couple of things in this. He's responding to set his friend straight. That's one thing that he's doing. Like, no, you're not in the wrong. You've done nothing wrong. But then he also is offering comfort to his friend. Do you see that? He says to his buddy, he goes, listen, my dad tells me what's going on. And so you are not going to die because I'm on your side, like I'm with you. And so not only is he like speaking the reality to David, like, no, you're not in the wrong, and we believe that Jonathan would have told him if he was, but he's offering this encouragement. One beautiful thing that godly friends do very well for each other is they keep us tethered to hope and to health and ultimately to God. They really like draw us back to that. Like when we're going off the deep end with our ideas or our actions, the godly friends in our midst are able to go, wait. Let me encourage you back into right thinking. Because David's spinning a little bit here, and Jonathan draws him back in. And then in verse 3, David took an oath and said, your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes. And he has said to himself, Jonathan must not know this, or he will be grieved. Yet as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, there's only a step between me and death. So David goes, listen, Jonathan, your dad knows of your friendship with me, so he's probably going to try to hide this from you. And so you just got to be aware that, like, my life is basically on thin ice, is what he's saying. There's a step between me and death. Like, it's kind of out of our hands. And then I love what Jonathan says in verse 4. Jonathan said to David, whatever you want me to do, I'll do for you. You ever had a friend, a person say that to you? Whatever you need, I will do for you. That's a radical thing to say to somebody. Whatever you need. Because in that moment, you're saying, like, even if something you need is going to cost me, like, you get it. You absolutely get it. And when I thought through my life, one of the things that came up in my history with my wife and I is when I was a youth pastor, she became a nurse. And when she became a nurse, we kind of looked at our finances and went, hey, we might be able to buy a house. And we called one of my best friends, a real estate agent at the time, and said, hey, could we afford a house? And he went, yes. He said, the payment, you could afford the payment, but you don't have enough for a down payment. And so my friend said, so I'm just going to give you my entire commission check. Basically, he gave us $10,000 just a friend, said, I'll give you $10,000 to help you buy this house. Like, nobody else has ever done that for me. Like, and so like, it was this unbelievable offering, because that was like $10,000 that didn't go into his kid's college fund. That was just, this is for you. It cost him something. And so like, when you think about what did that offer cost Jonathan to make that offer to David? Whatever you want, I'm with you.
Yeah, we talked about this because you think, oh, that's great, Jonathan did that. But as you really stop and look at where Jonathan was in life, it cost him a lot. He laid his life down, literally, because his dad was not mentally stable. I mean, at this point, Saul is a little bit sketchy. In fact, he's throwing spears at people, and everyone's kind of on edge because Saul's the king, and he's not quite stable, so he'll take people's lives like Game of Thrones style, just take them out for dumb reasons. And so by Jonathan defending David against his father's will, he's putting his life on the line. And on top of that, Jonathan, and you never think about this with him, you think, oh, Jonathan, what a good buddy. Jonathan's the prince. Like, he's supposed to be the future king. And yet, because of his friendship with David, and more so because his belief and trust that God has chosen David to be the future king, that he is going to align himself with David at personal, physical, emotional, mental, familial cost, because that's the decision he's made. So when he's just saying, I'm here for you, he's not just saying it. No, I got your back. No, he's already entered into it by meeting with David in the first place.
Yeah, it's a remarkable offer, because he's basically saying, I'm going to help you get whatever it is you need and want to get, even if it costs me something. Like, I'm thinking about if you've ever saved up for a car, or if you've ever saved up for a house, or if you've ever saved up for like something that you've really wanted, a toy, a motorcycle, a painting, whatever it would be, and you're just like, I'm saving for this. Imagine doing saving, and then you get to where you finally get like your whatever, your Tesla, or whatever it would be, and you're like, yes! And then I look at you, and you're like, dude, we're in a financial struggle, and what Jonathan's doing is he's going, oh, I'm going to let go of this thing that I've been saving for. I'm just going to give it all to you. That's a remarkable bond between these two people, where we see like this willingness to sacrifice, this willingness to encourage, this willingness to comfort. And later on in this passage, Jonathan goes on and he like speaks this beautiful oath to David. He says, I swear by the Lord, the God of Israel, I will surely sound out my father by this time, the day after tomorrow. If he is favorably disposed towards you, will I not send word and let you know? But if my father intends to harm you, may the Lord deal with me ever so severely if I do not let you know. He's saying like, I'm with you. More so than even my own family, I am with you. And you know what comes to my mind? Jesus, like in the New Testament at one point, calls us to a devotion to God like that. And he even says, like, if you don't, like, leave your own family to follow me, then your love is not in the right place. And it's weird because sometimes with Jesus, like, we're looking at David and Jonathan and we're going, how beautiful is this? That Jonathan's willing to leave his own family to be a godly friend to David. But when Jesus says it, for some reason, we get offended sometimes, where we're like, how Jesus tells us we've got to leave our own family to follow him? And I think that what we've done sometimes with Jesus is we've taken that romance out of the Jesus moment, whereas Jesus goes, yeah, you need to be so devoted to me that like you're going to align yourself with me, even if it costs you connection with your family, because that's the kind of love I have for you, and that's what I want back from you. And so to see that like in this relationship between Jonathan and David is this remarkable like example for us. And so as we like consider who are the people in our lives, who are the people in our church, who are the people in this room right now that God might be saying to you, like, be tethered to them. Like, know them and let them know you. Because as Boogie has, like, said, like, God has called us to each other. There's beautiful language, like you're a holy nation, a royal priesthood, like a collective group, a body, like that needs to be joined and united so that as we go out to love the world, we're like together as God's people. And Boog, I've shared with them parts of your story, but God brought you through this season, I don't know what the best way to say it is, wherein you had this new reality of what friendships meant to you and the kind of friend you were going to be to other people. So give the highlights of how God revealed that to you in your life.
Yeah, as we're talking about these type of friendships, they're always the friendship that the biblical friendship, the friendship that God's designed in us to not be alone, is that friendship where you know you can depend on people, where they're going to lay down their life for you. Like that is my kids are growing up. I have my teenage boys and my daughters here, and they have friends. They got a lot of friends. But do they have this kind of philo friendship? Not yet. They don't have friends that will lay down their lives for them. They kind of have mutuality and they're moving through life, but there's that level of friendship that we're talking about that has to be defined and be able to be seen by the people of God. People should be able to come into a church environment with the church people together and go, whoa, these guys are no joke. And so about 4 or 5 years ago, I got really sick. I was really healthy up to this point. It was sudden. We're not exactly sure where it came from. It might have been some of the mission work we were doing. But something triggered in my body, and very suddenly, more suddenly than usual with this autoimmune disease, my body started attacking my body. And within a year, I was incapacitated, and they had to send me to the big boys up at UCLA. And even they were like, we don't know what to do for you. You're dying. And they had to put me into a coma at one point. Because my lungs were failing. And very few people could get into the room. And it was towards the end also. The end meaning, hey, Stephanie, you need to come up with your kids. They don't want to say it, but it's like, you need to come say goodbye. And so in this room, and I remember the room from when I was in and out of consciousness, but there was a whiteboard. And very few people could come in because they're very serious at UCLA about who can come in, about rest and germs. But on this whiteboard were names that were put down there, the people that Stephanie and I knew were my brothers, the ones that would lay down their life for me, the ones that would drive the 2 hours up and the 2 hours back, the ones that would, some of them actually, talking financially, it was up in LA, there's nowhere to stay up there that is cheap. And so they rented an apartment for like $15,000. They all chipped in so that Stephanie could stay up there near the hospital. We had other family and friends. I mean, well, it wasn't family. My family's very broken, my biological family. But there's this family that surrounded us and took in our kids and were raising them while Stephanie's trying to care for me in my last hours. And on this whiteboard were the names. Josh, Jeremy, Nordy. They were the names were there of the brother. It was defined. And as you can tell, I didn't die. And I don't know why, but the Lord decided to use things to heal me. So I ended up having a double lung transplant. We didn't even know you could have that. We didn't even know what that was. And so here I am. And in that moment, that defining period of time, you have to ask yourself, okay, these were the ones that said you need to believe in our friendship. These people on the board were the ones that I could believe in, but I needed to. And I think that's what you need to do. That's what I've called my church to do. Who are the people that know they can believe in your friendship? Is there someone in this room, or do they come at the first service? Is there someone that's maybe not here, but you know they're part of this community of faith where you know they would put your name up on the board? Because that's who we need to be. And the reality is maybe that's not clarified. Maybe you have that kind of friendship that is clarified with someone here, but you just need to look at them face to face. Or maybe you're like, oh, I'll just text it. Whatever it is, but it's clarified that you need to believe in this friendship. And for some of you may not have that yet. That we experience that a lot. There's a lot of lonely people in this world, and there's lonely people in this church. And so you may be one of those people. You've got to take that step. You got to take that step to move into this community of faith, even when people don't realize they need to reach out to you yet. Because it's not that they don't want to, they just don't realize it yet. But the more that you're in the life of this family, then those things, you'll start to meet those people that you're like, oh, we've got that connection. And you too? And then that can develop. And what you do is you just start serving them.
Yeah. Glad you made it. I remember, because Boogie and I have been tethered for a long time, but it wasn't until after that your near-death experience.
But that was a conscious decision on my part, because I said, look, in the time that I have left, however long that is, there's certain people I need to be with, because I can't do the work God's calling to me without them being by my side. And basically I said, Buzz, don't know if you signed up for this, but I'm looking at you as one of those guys.
Right.
Whether you want to do it or not, if you don't do anything, then I'm getting a hint.
Right.
And so there was a conscious decision.
Our friendship really blossomed. I mean, we've been tethered and loved each other, but it was after that we kind of went, okay, we gotta make use of this time. And so I remember Bethy discovering this, saying, hey, I think Boog is really sick. Like Steph, his wife, she posted, I think you wrote on a piece of paper, and did you post that picture of that? Like you felt like, just share for a second. I know that we're
sure, because that's a long.
What was it? God, you wrote on a piece of paper. It isn't over. It isn't finished. What did you write?
Okay, so I didn't die, so I'm not one of those guys. I was there and then I came back, but it was very clear.
One of those guys just went to heaven and then came back.
I didn't do that, but the Lord. I had a very intimate moment, powerful moment with him. And I didn't really realize what was happening outside. There's a lot of things they tell you and don't tell you. But in the midst of that, I was in the presence of the Lord, and he asked me the question, do you want to come home? And I knew where home was, and we'd been wrestling with this as a family for a while, and yeah, that's home. This is not home. And so he asks you questions, not because he doesn't know the answer, but for you to wrestle with that. And I said, no, Lord, I want people to know this reckless love that I'm experiencing right now from you, that I've experienced from my wife, how we could talk about unconditional love, but I've seen it, I've felt it, I know it, and I really would love to go there, but I want to do this here. And the scripture that came to mind, and I couldn't remember where it was, but to live is Christ, and to die is gain. And to die is gain. There's nothing to be afraid of, by the way, when it comes to, I was really surprised. I'm like, I'm not really that afraid to die. Because you talk about it, but you don't think it's going to happen when the moment comes. But I really had this understanding and peace that I wouldn't have had without going through this moment. And so I woke up, and Nordy was there right by my bedside, and so was Stephanie. And Stephanie and I are trying to talk back and forth. And they have me intubated, which means they have a tube shoved down so you can't talk. So I'm trying to do hand signals. We pretty much were on the verge of divorce from our hand signals back and forth because she couldn't understand me. And I'm like, getting so frustrated because she would always say, are you ready to go home? I'm like, he's trying to kill me off? And so she walked out of the room, and Nordy was there. And so he had a clipboard, and I wrote on it because the Lord, I didn't know how much time, but in my mind, it was like, to live is Christ. And so I wrote something, and he couldn't read it. And he kept asking me, and I'm like, no, that's not it. That's not it. So Steph came back in, and we wrestled with divorce again, and she was trying to get the hand signals from me, and she looked at the paper, And she said, oh, it says, it's not over. And I was like, yes, that's what I'm trying to say. Not because the Lord said, oh, you're coming back and I'm going to give you this many years, but just, it's not over. There's work to be done. And if I'm going to do this work, and that was a clarifying moment for me, you can't do this without brothers next to you. And if you're a woman, you need to have those sisters next to you that you know they're by your side, because this life is just way too much to deal with. You got to have them right next to you.
Yeah. So, here's how we want to encourage you to move forward. As the way that I preach, I almost always want to send with an action or a challenge. And so here's the invitation. As in prayer, you ask God to reveal to you, who is it that God might have you investing in? Because the best way to draw these kinds of friendships to you is to offer this kind of friendship to others. And so here's how I want to encourage you as your pastor to move forward with this message. In prayer, just ask God, who do you want me to put on my whiteboard, and whose whiteboard should I try to be on? And here's how I want you guys to go into the week. Think of one person, two people. They don't have to be part of this church, but I want at least one to be part of this church. It could be somebody else from your family or whatever. And I want you to call them or send them a text and say, what can I do this week to help you achieve your goals? And then whatever they say, you say, got it. What else? 3 times. Because the first thing they're going to do is they're going to say, pray for me. That probably, right? What can I do to help you achieve your goals? Just pray for me. I want you to say, got it. What else? And now they're going to be uncomfortable because they're going to go, maybe just send me encouragement throughout the week. Got it. What else? Because if you are willing to back up like your offer, you'll get to, I need someone to pick my daughter up from dance on Wednesday. You know? And that's where you go, got it. What else? And if they trust your friendship, as Boogie was saying, man, these were people I could trust my friendship. Like, Bethany and I have been in a time where if somebody would have offered that to us, we would have said, we could use groceries. Imagine if you offer your friendship to somebody, what do you need? My family needs groceries. Got it. What else? So think of who God might want you to offer that kind of support to. How can I help you advance in your goals? And then say, got it, what else? 3 times. Amen? Okay, I'm going to pray real quick. And I'm going to ask you guys to make a commitment to who you are going to do that with. So join me in prayer. And here's how I want you to do this. I want you to set your purse down. I want you to set your Bible down. I want you to sit upright in your chair. Be ready to just engage with the Spirit of God here so nothing's, distracting you in your hand. And just pray this right now. In the silence of your mind, in the silence of your heart, pray this. Say, God, who in my life are you calling me to a deeper connection with? What brother, what sister? Bring a face to my mind, God. And now, I'm just going to assume that God has put a face in your mind. I want you to ask God this. Say, God, is there something you need me to point out to them? Or is there some way you need me to just encourage them? And let God speak. Just in the silence of your mind, silence of your heart right now, I invite you to pray this. God, I commit to offer my friendship to those individuals. I will step up and I will back up my words and offers with actions. In the power of your precious name, we pray this. Amen. Boogie, thanks for being here with us this morning. And somebody told me after first service, they said, man, I want to watch you team preach with Boogie every week. And so on behalf of the Lambs Fellowship, we're offering you a job. And the only thing you really have to ask, since you live at the beach and we're in Lake Elsinore, is, are you ready for your children to hate you? If you are, move them away from the beach, buddy. So we're glad that you were here. And you guys, Dave Vance is also a long-term friend of mine. This is like a parade of Buzzy's friendships from South Orange County from 20 years ago. So Dave, thanks for being here. And Boogie, thanks for being here.